Michael Jordan, one of the greatest basketball players of all time, a global icon, and a man whose name is synonymous with success. You'd think that someone of his stature would be welcomed with open arms anywhere he went. But what if I told you that wasn't always the case? That even someone as legendary as Michael Jordan once faced a moment of unexpected rejection, one that led to a response no one saw coming. It happened on what should have been an ordinary night. Jordan, fresh off another victorious game, decided to celebrate with a meal at a high-end restaurant. Dressed sharp, carrying the confidence of a champion, he stepped through the doors, expecting nothing but top-tier service. After all, this was Michael Jordan. His presence alone could light up an entire city. But instead of the warm welcome most would assume he'd receive, he was met with something entirely different. A refusal. The restaurant staff, for reasons that would soon become the center of controversy, denied him service. Imagine that, one of the most recognizable faces in the world, being told he wasn't allowed to sit down and enjoy a meal. Whether it was a strict dress code, an outdated policy, or something more personal, the message was clear: they didn't want him there. For a brief moment, there must have been silence. The kind of silence that lingers when something shocking happens, when expectations are flipped upside down. Those around him, his friends, the other guests, waited to see what he would do next. Would he argue, demand an explanation? Would he leave quietly, accepting the insult, or would he make a scene? But Michael Jordan isn't just any man. He's built different. A lifetime of competition, of proving doubters wrong, had shaped him into someone who never backed down from a challenge. And in that moment, he made a choice that no one in that restaurant, perhaps no one watching this video, would expect. What happened next? Let's just say it left people talking for years. And the way Jordan handled the situation: pure class, pure strategy, exactly what you'd expect from a champion. Stay tuned, because this story is just getting started. Michael Jordan stood there for a moment, processing what had just happened. The weight of the refusal hung in the air, thick with unspoken words. People nearby had noticed. Whispers started spreading across the room. Some guests glanced over, their curiosity piqued. Others pretended not to see, unsure of how this would unfold. His friends exchanged uneasy looks, waiting for his reaction. This was Michael Jordan, a man used to being treated like royalty, someone who had worked his way to the very top through sheer talent and determination. Being turned away like this, it didn't happen to him. But here he was, standing in a restaurant that had just denied him a table. No raised voices, no argument, just a quiet moment where Jordan locked eyes with a staff member who had refused him. If there was frustration, he didn't show it. Instead, he exhaled slowly, nodded to himself, and turned on his heel. Without a word, he walked out the door. The tension didn't leave with him. In fact, it only grew stronger. Conversations picked up, hushed but urgent. Why had they refused him? What was the reason? Some speculated it was the restaurant's strict policy, maybe an exclusive rule they weren't willing to bend, even for a global icon. Others weren't so sure. Was there something deeper at play? Outside, Jordan's friends caught up with him, trying to make sense of the situation. "Mike, you good?" one of them asked, watching his expression carefully. Jordan didn't answer right away. He had been in intense situations before, game-winning shots, high-pressure moments, doubters questioning his every move. But this wasn't the court. This wasn't a game. And yet, as he stood there on the sidewalk, he felt the same fire rising in him. He glanced back at the restaurant, the lights glowing warmly through the windows. Inside, guests continued their meals, waiters carried trays, and life moved on as if nothing had happened. But something had happened, and Jordan wasn't the type to just forget about it. There were options, of course. He could go somewhere else, find another restaurant, and let this moment fade into the background. He could make a call, pull some strings, and get the treatment he knew he deserved. But that wasn't his style. If Michael Jordan had learned anything over the years, it was that the best way to handle a situation wasn't always the obvious one. So instead of walking away defeated, he made a decision. a quiet but powerful decision that would change everything. His friends watched as a small smile played at the corner of his lips, not a smile of amusement, but one of certainty. "They'll remember this," he finally said, his voice calm but full of something unshakable. They didn't know what he meant. Not yet. But they would soon, because Michael Jordan was about to turn this moment of rejection into something no one would ever forget. Michael Jordan didn't need to argue. He didn't need to demand respect. He had spent his entire career proving himself through action, and this situation would be no different. But that didn't mean he was going to forget. No, this wasn't something he would just brush off. There was a lesson to be taught here, one that would come in a way no one expected. As he and his friends walked away from the restaurant, they could still feel the weight of what had just happened. One of them shook his head in disbelief. "Man, they really turned you away. You, of all people." Jordan just smirked, but there was something in his eyes, something calculated. He had seen obstacles before, but he never saw them as dead ends. He saw them as opportunities. And in this moment, an idea was forming in his mind. Back inside the restaurant, the atmosphere had returned to normal, or at least that's what it seemed like. The waiter who had denied Jordan's service still felt a strange tension in the air. He knew who he had just turned away. Everyone did. And now there was a lingering discomfort. Some guests exchanged glances, murmuring about what had just happened. A few of them had even considered stepping outside to tell Jordan that they didn't agree with how he had been treated. One particular couple, seated near the entrance, couldn't stop thinking about it. The husband, a longtime basketball fan, kept shaking his head. That was Michael Jordan, he whispered to his wife. What were they thinking? His wife, equally puzzled, leaned in. "You think he'll let that slide?" Her husband wasn't sure. He had followed Jordan's career for years, watched him dominate the NBA, turn losses into motivation, and always find a way to come out on top. This didn't feel like something he would ignore. No, Michael Jordan wasn't the type to just walk away forever. And they were right. A few days passed, and life went on. But then something started happening, something small at first, but it quickly grew. Rumors spread. People in the city started talking. Some claimed Jordan had spoken privately about the incident. Others said he had been seen scouting locations nearby. It wasn't clear what he was up to, but one thing was certain: he hadn't forgotten. Then an article surfaced. A well-known sports journalist hinted that Jordan was planning something big. The restaurant that had refused him service. They had no idea what was coming. Meanwhile, the owner of the restaurant remained unaware. Business carried on as usual, the tables full, the staff busy. But whispers started making their way to him. A few customers asked if the story was true. Had they really denied Michael Jordan a table? The owner dismissed it, assuming the moment would pass. But Michael Jordan wasn't one to let moments pass. He was about to make sure that everyone, especially that restaurant, remembered this moment for a very, very long time. Days turned into weeks, but the tension surrounding that night at the restaurant hadn't faded. If anything, it had only grown stronger. Whispers turned into conversations, and conversations turned into headlines. Sports analysts speculated about it on TV. Fans on social media debated whether it was just an unfortunate misunderstanding or something more. But the one thing everyone agreed on: Michael Jordan wasn't the type to let things go. Then, something unexpected happened. One morning, the owner of the restaurant arrived to find a group of reporters gathered outside. Cameras flashed, microphones were raised, and questions were being thrown around. Confused, he pushed through the small crowd and entered his establishment, where his staff stood huddled, murmuring about something they had seen in the news. A local newspaper lay open on the counter, and the headline sent a jolt through him. Asterisk Michael Jordan makes a move, and it's right next to door asterisk. The owner's hands tightened around the edge of the newspaper as he read further. Jordan had just finalized a major business deal. The details were still coming out, but one thing was clear. He had just purchased a brand new property. And the location, less than a block away from the very restaurant that had denied him service. Word spread like wildfire. People in the city couldn't believe it. Had Jordan really bought a place just to make a statement? Was this his way of turning the situation around? And most importantly, what was he planning to do with it? Rumors started flying. Some claimed he was opening a competing restaurant, one that would outshine the one that had refused him. Others suggested he might turn it into something even bigger, something that would leave a lasting mark. But the truth? No one knew for sure. He had kept quiet, letting the speculation grow. The restaurant staff felt the shift almost immediately. Some employees became nervous, sensing that the decision to turn Jordan away had sparked something much bigger than they ever imagined. A few loyal customers even started questioning whether they should keep coming. The whole thing had turned into something much larger than a simple refusal of service. It had become a moment people weren't willing to forget. Meanwhile, Jordan remained focused. He had been in these situations before, not in a restaurant, but in competition, in moments when people doubted him, when they underestimated what he was capable of. And just like on the court, he had a plan. Then came the announcement. Jordan was ready to reveal his next move, and it was bigger than anyone had expected. Reporters gathered, fans held their breath, and the restaurant that had refused him. They were about to realize just how much one small decision could change everything. The moment was here. The world was watching. And what Michael Jordan did next? No one saw it coming. The anticipation was at an all-time high. Everyone wanted to know what Michael Jordan had planned. Reporters camped outside the new property, fans speculated on social media, and even rival business owners in the area started paying attention. The restaurant that had refused him, they were nervous, really nervous. The owner tried to brush it off, pretending it didn't matter. But behind closed doors, he was watching every move Jordan made. If this was about competition, he had reason to be worried. Jordan wasn't just a former athlete. He was a businessman, a perfectionist, someone who turned everything he touched into a success. If he was opening a restaurant, it wouldn't just be good, it would be legendary. Then the second shockwave hit. A press release quietly made its way to news outlets, and within hours, the story exploded. Michael Jordan wasn't just opening a restaurant. He was launching an exclusive, high-end dining experience, one that would set a new standard in the city. Not only that, but he had partnered with some of the biggest names in the culinary world, bringing in top chefs, luxury interior designers, and a marketing team that knew exactly how to make an impact. But the biggest twist, he wasn't building it next door to the restaurant that turned him away. He was building it right across the street. The message was clear. Jordan wasn't just entering the restaurant business, he was making a statement. He wasn't going to argue about being refused service. He wasn't going to call for boycotts. Instead, he was doing what he had always done, letting his actions do the talking. And now, the restaurant that had once been a popular hotspot was suddenly under threat. The buzz surrounding Jordan's new place was undeniable. People who had never even dined in the area were now making plans to visit once it opened. Reservations. The phone lines were already jammed with calls. The demand was unlike anything the city had seen before. Inside the original restaurant, tension filled the air. Staff members whispered to each other, wondering what would happen next. Some feared for their jobs, sensing that the wave Jordan was creating could wipe out everything they had built. Others felt conflicted. After all, they had nothing against him personally. They had just been following the rules. The owner, however, wasn't about to go down without a fight. He had spent years building his reputation, earning the loyalty of customers, and now he felt backed into a corner. He needed a plan, and fast. But what he didn't realize was that Jordan was already 10 steps ahead. He hadn't just set out to create a competing restaurant. He had set out to redefine the entire dining experience in the city. And as the grand opening approached, it was clear that nothing would ever be the same again. This wasn't just about food. This was about legacy. And Michael Jordan was about to remind the world why he was the greatest, on and off the court. The day had finally arrived. The grand opening of Michael Jordan's restaurant was all anyone in the city could talk about. The streets were packed, cameras flashed, and VIP guests lined up outside, waiting to step inside what was already being called the most exclusive dining experience in town. Across the street, the owner of the restaurant that had refused Jordan stood by the window, watching the scene unfold. His worst fears had become a reality. His once thriving establishment, once the place to be, now felt like an afterthought. There were still customers, but nothing compared to the spectacle happening in front of Jordan's new place. The energy, the excitement, it was on a completely different level. Inside Jordan's restaurant, everything was flawless. The design was sleek and modern, the lighting warm and inviting, and the menu crafted by world-class chefs. Every detail had been carefully thought out, just like every move Jordan had made throughout his career. His friends, business partners, and even a few celebrity guests raised their glasses in celebration. This wasn't just a restaurant opening, it was a statement, a moment in history. And then, just when it seemed like the story had reached its peak, Jordan did something no one saw coming. He stepped outside. The cameras turned, the crowd quieted, and in a single unexpected move, he walked across the street, straight into the restaurant that had once turned him away. The owner froze. The staff fell silent. No one knew what to expect. Was he here to prove a point? To remind them of their mistake? To take one final victory lap? But instead, Jordan simply smiled. He reached out, shook the owner's hand, and said, "No hard feelings." The tension in the room broke instantly. The owner, caught off guard, hesitated before shaking Jordan's hand back. He knew at that moment that he had underestimated the man standing in front of him. Jordan wasn't just about competition, he was about elevating everything around him. Then came the final twist. Jordan didn't just stop at a handshake. He made an offer. Instead of trying to bury the restaurant, he wanted to partner with it. He had no interest in running his competitor out of business. Instead, he saw an opportunity to create something bigger than just one restaurant, to turn this rivalry into something that could change the industry. The owner, stunned, took a deep breath. He had spent weeks worrying about what Jordan's success would mean for his business. But in this moment, he realized that this wasn't about revenge. It was about vision. The deal was made, and just like that, what started as an act of rejection turned into something no one expected, a partnership that would reshape the city's dining scene. Jordan walked out, the crowd still watching, still processing what had just happened. He had turned a moment of exclusion into a story of inclusion. He had taken a setback and flipped it into an opportunity, not just for himself, but for everyone involved. And just like that, Michael Jordan proved once again why he was the greatest. Not just in basketball, not just in business, but in life. In the weeks that followed, the news of Michael Jordan's unexpected partnership spread everywhere. What had started as a moment of rejection had turned into one of the most talked about business moves of the year. People admired how he handled the situation, not with anger or resentment, but with strategy, patience, and vision. The two restaurants, once competitors, now found themselves working together in ways no one could have predicted. With Jordan's influence and resources, both establishments flourished. The original restaurant, once worried about losing customers, now had a new wave of interest. Tourists and locals alike wanted to visit both locations, experiencing the contrast between classic dining and the modern luxury of Jordan's new place. Instead of one business thriving at the expense of another, both grew stronger side by side. For the restaurant owner, the experience had been humbling. He had made a mistake, but rather than hold it against him, Jordan had turned it into an opportunity. That kind of thinking, the ability to turn obstacles into stepping stones, was what had made Jordan a champion in every aspect of life. It wasn't just about winning. It was about seeing the bigger picture. Jordan, as always, stayed focused on the future. He had proven his point without ever needing to say much. His actions had spoken louder than any words could. He had taken control of the narrative, shifting it from one of exclusion to one of empowerment. Customers who had been following the story closely felt inspired. It wasn't just about business or basketball anymore, it was about mindset. Jordan had shown the world that setbacks aren't always what they seem. With the right perspective, they can be the very thing that leads to something greater. As time passed, the initial buzz faded, but the impact remained. The partnership between the two restaurants became a blueprint for others in the industry, proving that competition doesn't always have to lead to division. Sometimes it can lead to innovation, collaboration, and even friendship. One evening, as Jordan sat at a private table in his restaurant, he looked out the window toward the place that had once turned him away. He didn't feel anger, nor did he feel the need to dwell on the past. Instead, he just nodded to himself, a small smile forming. A waiter approached, setting down a plate in front of him. "Anything else I can get for you, sir?" Jordan looked up, thought for a moment, then simply said, "Nah, this is perfect." Because it was. Not just the meal, not just the success, but the journey. The way everything had unfolded, the lessons learned, the perspectives changed, the unexpected friendships formed. And with that, Michael Jordan once again reminded the world why true greatness isn't just about what you achieve, it's about how you handle every moment along the way.